Hi, I'm Micah Clark. Thank you for joining us today. I have a special guest with us on a topic that we haven't talked about on our weekly video a lot, although I write about it quite often in my weekly email on Wednesday. So I'm very excited to have Nathan Sanders here. He is with one of the nation's leading school choice groups, if not the nation's leading school choice group, and they're based right here in Indianapolis. So you may have heard of EdChoice. They make a lot of news. They've got great staff. I know several people on their staff. I met Nathan at a conference recently and asked him if he would come on and talk about school choice. And so Nathan, you're the Policy and Advocacy Director, if I got that right. And
That's right.
Appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely, Micah. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I wanted to give you just kind of a general question because, like I said, we've not discussed school choice on our videos before, although I do talk about it a lot and have used a lot of your research, by the way. You guys put out some really good stuff, not just public policy surveys, but how school choice works in different states. But I just want to start off, give us a big picture of where we are in 2025 with school choice in various states. How many states have it to one degree or another? And then I'll ask you specifically after that about Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are various types of school choice programs, as you mentioned before. Some of the more popular ones are education savings accounts, school vouchers, tax credit scholarships. And so those are a few of the more popular ones. There are now, I think that there are 15 states with what we would call universal school choice. But actually, the work we do at EdChoice, more specifically, we would say that there are 5 states who have true universal school choice. And what that means is we're focused on all the students, all the dollars, and all the options, meaning there are some universal programs out there or that you would read would be universal, but maybe they only have universal eligibility, but maybe they don't have universal funding or universal uses, right? And so at EdChoice, we like to classify that there are states with true universal school choice, 5 of them, and then there are other states with universal aspects. And so the 5 states with true universal school choice, we would say are Arizona, Arkansas, Florida, West Virginia, and New Hampshire. Okay. And so most of them, I think all of those are education savings account programs.
Well, I hear a lot about, I focus specifically on Indiana, and I hear good things about our school choice program, but I kind of expected we might be up there in those top 5. Tell us where Indiana is kind of in that category, what we have for people who may or may not know. We recently had some things happen in our legislature during our budget session this year. So tell us kind of from your perspective, where does Indiana rank and what all do we have?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Indiana has an array of different school choice options for different types of students. I think most popularly, Indiana has a universal voucher program, which, don't get me wrong, on my earlier statement, Indiana is absolutely a leader and somewhat of a pioneer in the school choice movement. They've had some type of school choice for many, many years, as you know, Micah. And so Indiana, the reason we wouldn't say that it is truly universal is because you guys have a voucher program. And so all students are eligible for your program, which is fantastic. I believe most recently you guys have all the funding for that voucher program, which is even more fantastic. The only thing that we would say would not be truly universal is the function of a voucher, meaning really in Indiana, parents can only use this money for private school tuition, which is one that's still great, and that's what the majority of parents will use it for. But comparing that to like an education savings account program, for example, you're not able to necessarily use that voucher money to go and join a micro school or getting tutoring or therapy services. So it's just a little less flexible. But other than that, Indiana is absolutely a leader in school choice, and you guys serve many students in the state, and many parents are happy with that voucher in Indiana.
So from where you sit with EdChoice, would you recommend legislators in Indiana look at making our vouchers more applicable to other education options rather than just tuition?
Yeah, absolutely. That just gives parents more options, right? I think we hear lots of things about vouchers, mostly good things, right? They're still able to help families. Parents are still satisfied with it. Lots of schools are able to participate in a voucher program. Many of them in Indiana, Christian schools, which is fantastic. I think where you run into with education savings account is it's just a little more focused and innovative. What we like to use the term mission driven, right? So, a school like a micro school or a learning pod or some type of innovation center that's serving a small group of students, they could have a specific focus, right? And maybe it's faith-based, maybe it's STEM focused, maybe it's nature focused. So, yeah, absolutely. Education savings accounts give families just more flexibility and more options, which they're able to serve students a little bit better.
Well, let me play dumb here for a second, Nathan. Can you explain for our audience, because I'm not sure how well I could explain because we don't really have them that much. Explain what an education savings account is.
Yeah, absolutely. I apologize. So an education savings account is really just a publicly funded sort of government authorized account that parents, if eligible, have access to. So the usual function is, a legislature passes a pot of money, or maybe it's within your education funding that's publicly funded, and they say, hey, look, these certain parents qualify, or maybe all parents qualify, which is what we would work for this education savings account. And you could use it for private school tuition. You could use it for tutoring services. You could use it, for therapies, behavioral, physical therapies. You could use it for online curriculum if you're a homeschool family. The opportunities are endless. And they say, we're going to, if you apply for this program and you get approved, we're going to put this money in a government authorized account, and you have access to that money at all times. And then on the sort of market side, the supply side is what we would say, vendors who are interested in serving these students can apply to be a part of this program, right? So if I'm like an Amazon and I say I want to be able to sell my office supplies and school supplies and things like that to students in Indiana, I'm Amazon, I'm going to go and be a part of this vendor platform. Or more locally, if I'm a tutor, like I'm a former teacher, I like to tutor, and I want to tutor kids in Indiana, a part of this education savings account program, I can then, Nathan's LLC tutoring can apply to be a part of this vendor platform and be able to serve students in their area. And so it sort of offers this platform to where you're truly tapping into an education marketplace, sort of like Milton Friedman envisioned with these types of programs. And it gives parents more options to truly customize their kids' education no matter where they are. So it's a very innovative, very cool process.
We're talking with Nathan Sanders of EdChoice, and I'll be honest, I gave Nathan some questions. I'm going to throw you one I didn't give you, but I know you can answer it. You know your stuff. I read a report just last week that was fascinating from the state about basically how many kids are doing vouchers, the growth of vouchers in Indiana, and something jumped out at me that I thought was really fascinating, because we hear a lot from the education establishment and the teachers unions about schools are constantly underfunded. Public schools never have enough, even though every year our budget increases school funding, and 47% of our budget goes to K through 12. If you had higher ed, it goes over 50%. There's a lot of education dollars going to public schools. But what it said in there was, if you look at the number of students who are being taught through a voucher, it actually, if those kids had gone to a public school, because the voucher doesn't cover the same amount we spend for public education, it actually saved the taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars for parents to use vouchers. And I thought that was fascinating, because we talk about savings to taxpayers, where most families probably feel like their kids are getting a better education, or they're maybe happier there. It's really a bargain for taxpayers. Have you run across that before?
Yeah, absolutely. And Micah, that's kind of the case in pretty much every state that has some type of school choice program. It's usually the same formula, right? These students who are currently in public school or would otherwise go to public school are able to access this voucher or ESA program. And usually it's, around, in some cases, 80 to 90% of that state portion of per pupil funding. Sometimes it's even less. Sometimes it's 50, 60%. And what you see there are cost savings to taxpayers, right, and state budgets, because they're spending less per pupil. And it's a win-win, because parents are able to choose the type of education they're able to get with these dollars, and they're usually more satisfied with the options that they choose, and the students are more satisfied. And so it's a win-win all around, and that's why we advocate for this so hard, because it's better for taxpayers and it's better for families.
Nathan, one of the things I've thought, and this may be kind of off the wall, but as Indiana has grown to become one of the largest voucher states in the nation, or one of the larger ones, and we basically have almost any family in Indiana of any income level can qualify for a voucher. What I hear from a lot of parents is, I would love to take a voucher, but I may live in Tipton County and there's no Christian school there, or maybe they live in a rural area where they might want to try a private school. Have you seen, and so one of the concerns I have is you have a supply and demand issue. You have a high demand for parents who might want to put their children in a different type of school, but you don't have enough schools to choose from. Have you seen in other states as vouchers or school choice or ESAs grow, that there's kind of a market-driven growth of new private school options coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few answers to this question. Firstly, I'll start with just yes, right? The market does respond to programs like these. I think that when you look at just vouchers, when you're looking at just private schools eligible, it may take a little bit longer versus if you were to open up an education savings account universally in a state. Because of the sort of different types of models that are able to participate in that market, they're able to just respond a little bit quicker. I think looking at something like a learning pod or a micro school, even if if they're faith-based, there's a church on every corner, pretty much everywhere in America. And so churches that are able to respond, if these students have access to an education savings account, the church can get together and say, hey, let's start a learning pod a few days a week, or let's start, let's host a co-op, a homeschool co-op in our church 4 or 5 days a week. And so you're just able to respond a little bit quicker, specifically with things like education savings accounts, just because there's so much flexibility. Now, not to discount the work that private schools have done with voucher programs. Private schools have absolutely responded. Specifically, Christian schools have absolutely responded to the call to be able to serve these students. I think when you look at a state like Florida, Micah, that have also had some type of school choice for over 2 decades, and now they're to the point where they have a universal program, and school choice is just such a common culture there for families. It's understood. Looking at a place like Florida, they just have a very robust landscape of school choice options. Over half the student population in the state of Florida right now utilize some type of school choice. That could be private school choice program like an ESA, magnet school, charter school, homeschool. It's very diverse, it's very robust, and there are lots of different school types within that mix because of the market response. And so I guess that's a long answer to say, yes, absolutely, schools will respond to something like universal vouchers. But I think that schools and education entrepreneurs and faith leaders can respond even quicker than what we've seen when it's an education savings account type, just because it's so much more flexible.
One of the things I think that predated our voucher program that really kind of set the groundway for this, and if there's anybody listening who says, I've got grandkids in Massachusetts or some liberal state, I'll put it that way, who maybe is dominated by teachers' unions, doesn't like school choice. One of the things I think any state should be able to do is have the money follow the child, to where if the child doesn't want to go to public school A, and they can go to public school B because maybe it's closer, maybe it's for whatever reason. So inter-school choice is also a big part of this in at least the early stages. Do most states have that type of basic tuition following the student program?
Not always. So I kind of jumped the gun earlier. So what we are focusing on here at EdChoice is all students, all dollars, all options. And the all dollars part of that is exactly what you're talking about, Micah. It's money follows the child, offering that parent the flexibility to take their money and be able to use it at a school of their choice, right? And so 5 of those states have a school choice program where truly the money follows the child. A parent applies for the program, they get approved, and the money is there in the state budget for those families. There's no wait lists, there's no waiting or uncertainty for that scholarship. The parents apply, they get the money because the state lawmakers have sort of created a system of this automatic funding. And it just creates that consistency to where the parents can trust it, and then they're able, and then on the other side, the supply side, the market, these schools and these entrepreneurs and these faith leaders are also able to have that consistency and to trust it. And then the whole ecosystem just works in tandem versus a state that may have a program, but the money doesn't necessarily follow the child. The lawmakers maybe have to debate every year on how much money they're going to give and how much of the wait list they want to clear. So there's lots of sort of uncertainty there, and sometimes you can kind of lose trust. Both the market and parents can lose trust in that. And so absolutely, we advocate for money following the child. I think that the states that do that, Micah, have more successful programs for sure.
Yeah. Well, with Nathan Sanders of EdChoice, I know you've got a conference to run too, but I want to ask you one last question before we close, because people have heard a little bit about this. The big, beautiful bill that President Trump was pushing had something in it about school choice, which I didn't realize before it was passed. I heard about it afterwards. And tell us what was in that bill that school choice advocates would like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you this, from the federal level, this is a step in the right direction. Look, fundamentally at EdChoice, we think that education is a state's issue. But what the president and lawmakers did in Congress with this program is they set up a system cleverly, I think, to be able to support the states. And so what they did is they established a federal tax credit where individuals can claim $1,700 on their taxes. And what that does is in each respective state, if these states opt into this program, they establish scholarship granting organizations, and these scholarship granting organizations raise this money from certain taxpayers, and students who qualify in each state will be 300% of the median, I think, poverty level is how they put it in each state. And so lower income families in each state, if established, can choose a scholarship granting organization and get this money to be able to go and use it for tuition at a school of their choice. And so the great thing about this program, Micah, and which I think is most important, is that this program can work in tandem with state programs. So a family in Indiana who meets the income requirements for the federal tax credit may also be utilizing some type of school choice in Indiana, whether that's your universal voucher or your education savings account, and they're able to work together and use both if needed. And so specifically for low-income families, this gives them that extra support to be able to go even further. And so I think this federal program, yes, will work in many states, maybe not every state, because there are political factors that I think will affect this, but in states specifically like Indiana, it's going to be able to support families even more, which is a pretty cool thing.
Have you heard any word on whether or not Governor Braun will opt in? I assume he would. He seems pretty supportive. But has he taken any steps yet, or is it even rolled out yet?
I'm not sure. So to kind of give you some timeline, the rulemaking process for this program in Congress will go on next year, and the program will not take effect until 2027. So a lot of these governors, even more conservative governors, maybe not have commented on it yet. I think the general assumption is that Governor Braun will opt in. I'm not sure if there's a lot of questions out there for that, but yeah, the rulemaking process will go on, and then in 2027 we'll take off. So I'm sure especially next year, we'll hear from many governors in many states about this program.
Well, Nathan, I so much appreciate your time. You really know this issue well. It was very helpful. Before we go, tell our audience about EdChoice, your website, how people can learn more about the work you do and your organization with EdChoice.
Absolutely. Well, Micah, first of all, thank you for having me on today. I really enjoyed this conversation. So at the core, as you mentioned, Micah, earlier, the core of EdChoice is the data and research that we have. And so we're able to support folks like you, support other policy folks in the state, lawmakers, with what we have on school choice. And so you can check us out at edchoice.org. You can read more about what school choice is. You can read more about various states and the school choice options they have. And a good example of some of the resources that we provide that may be of interest to you is we actually have something called the EdChoice Share. And what that means is we go into every state and we look at the shares of types of school choice that are in that state. And so you can go in Indiana and look at how many students are utilizing school choice, private school choice like a voucher or an ESA. You can go and see how many students are utilizing charters, public school, and you could really get the mix of what the insights to Indiana are when it comes to schooling options. And you can see over the years, as this voucher has been available to more and more students, that the school choice options have even grown, which is pretty consistent in every state that offers school choice. So check us out, edchoice.org. We have tons of research and publications of various types that may be of interest to folks, and we're always happy to provide those resources.
Well, I'm glad you are, because my spiritual gift is plagiarism, and I have used your work quite a bit. So people think I'm smarter than I am. It's oftentimes because I'm using great resources. In fact, I can see on my desk right over there one of your publications that I've got highlighted. So I really appreciate the research and the policy work you do and the surveys about parental happiness with school choice in different states. It's for a policy geek like me, I really like the work you do. But for parents, I think it will encourage them on the positive things about school choice through EdChoice. So Nathan, thank you for joining us. I appreciate your time. I'm Micah Clark. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, we will have EdChoice's website in the link below. You can always email me if you have questions as well. But I'm Micah Clark with American Family Association. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.